Thank you. We'll break half an hour and then resume for our session on performing organization. Thank you.
Well done. Nice, nice to see.
Our two seminars. Before we move on to the book signing ceremony with Antonio, then Q&A and the master class on big data today. And I'd like to introduce a friend of mine, Jeremy Blain. Jeremy is a co-founder for the digitalization leadership specialist and the ticking clock. He's also the CEO for the performing organization. He's an author for an Amazon bestseller, The Inner CEO, and has been CEO for the past 30 years. Unfortunately, he could not come and attend with us due to some corona obstacles, but the digital transformation get him to be with us today through Zoom. So he's gonna share his insights and desktop. And after that, anybody who has a question, we're gonna zoom the camera so he can see you, and we'll get you the wireless mic and he can hear you as if he was with us today. So would like us to start, Jeremy?
Many thanks indeed, Dr. Sadi, to advisors, to the British Egyptian Business Association, to my fellow panelists and experts, and all of you, of course, special guests who are there. I'm really sorry I can't be there today. I would have loved to have come, but my onward travel means that the rules and regulations are very difficult to navigate. So next time, I promise. So today, what am I going to do? Well, today I'm going to go into the theme that you're covering over this 2 days. And I'm going to talk about what high performance leadership looks like for something called the triple new. And the triple new is where we are now. Some of us call it the new normal. Some of us call it the future of work, but actually it's happening right now. And at the heart of the triple new are a few issues. And those issues start when we look at organizations and leadership and the transformational journey that they've been on in the decade ahead. Now, what I'm going to do is use Slido, and you can go to slido.com and put in the code that you see there. I've got a couple of polls and I've got some opportunities for you to post questions there too. So please feel free. Okay, so if you take a look at that, you can go into that right now on your smart device. And we'll come to that in a second, but it will come up on the screen later on as well. So what are the big leadership challenges that take us to this point right now? Well, it is reflected on these three numbers, as you see on the right-hand side, and what's underneath it. Now, the first number you may be familiar with because that comes from Antonio, who you've already seen, and Robin, who you will see later on from the Strategy Implementation Institute. And that's around strategies. Strategy implementation failure rates are at 63 or near 63%. When you add digital into the mix, digital transformation implementation failure rates are over 80%. And in fact, even since the pandemic, it has been over 70%, which is cause for worry. And McKinsey and the bottom number say that, you know, the real issue actually is the drain that we're going to have from leadership potentially over the next 3 years, because they predict that 75% of existing senior leaders could fail. Now, that's really worrying. And why? Well, because we're in the so-called VUCA world. And I've now added a D onto that. It's the VUCAD world, not the VUCA world. It is now the distributed element that we've got into that and all of the new things that have come over the last couple of years. But let's just take a pause, because the interesting thing about these numbers were these were the numbers as we came into 2020. Then the pandemic hit. The pandemic has on one level been the greatest accelerator of digital transformation since the birth of the internet. But on the other, it has caught many countries, economies, businesses, founders, and entrepreneurs out. And when we look at that, I'm going to invite you to go to Slido now. And want to ask you this question. So if you could either go into the QR code or into the web link there and put in the code. And I'd like you to answer this question. What do you think? How many global organizations did not allow any remote working as we entered into January 2020, just before the pandemic? What do you think? Go ahead into Slido and keep those votes coming in. Thank you. So 44.7%, so quite a swing there actually for some. So keep those votes coming in. There's just 3 people voted so far. Keep it coming, 17%. It's a little bit like watching a race here coming, but 44% in the lead. 7 taken it ahead as well. Keep those votes coming in. So this is just 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, and the amount of companies globally that did not allow any form of remote working. Keep those votes coming in. Excellent, excellent. I'll give you another 10 seconds for those of you not managed to get in yet. Okay, so 4 out of 10 of you are saying that it's 44%, and you would be correct. In fact, a quarter of you, in fact, more of you think that it is much less than that, but it's much more. It's almost a half of all organizations globally did not allow remote working, which is really cause for concern. So what is the real issue here when we look at it? Well, simply put, the real issue is this. It is mindset issue first, but also then the transformational action that comes from it. And I think this quote sums it up absolutely beautifully, as does the photo on the right-hand side. And the right-hand side photo is not just one I've plucked up. You know, we're not necessarily in offices anymore. We've not got paper, or we shouldn't have paper all over our desk. He said, looking at my desk, I've got paper everywhere. It shouldn't be like that. And if we think it's just men that have got the solutions for transformational worlds as we go in, let's just take a look at how the world has turned over the last couple of years. And actually, we need to be much more diverse, equitable, inclusive, not just from a gender bias point of view, but also from lots of diversity lenses. This is where the power of everybody starts coming into it. But fundamentally, we've got to start thinking like we're in the 21st century. Not always be informed from the legacy of the past, because some of those things are redundant. Some of those things need to be evolved. And that's why us as leaders, or whether you're in politics as ministers, whether you're in business as leaders or managers, whether you're founders or entrepreneurs, we need to unlearn some old habits. We need to relearn some of the evolving factors. And we just need to learn a lot of the new things that are happening out there, how to lead and manage in a more distributed world, for example. And when I look at what leaders are saying out there that are doing it, and some politicians and leaders, just take a look at some of these quotes. I hope they're coming up big enough on the screen. I imagine that they would do. But I love the one on the top right as you see it, as you're looking through. Don Tusk from the European Union talking about, you know, what is making the real difference. He's talking about economies. He's also talking about business, the digital, knowledge-based, gig-fueled economies, which is one of the biggest trends hitting the world right now. You may have heard of the Great Resignation, or the Big Quit, as it's often called. This is fueling the gig economy, not just through millennials or Generation Z who are joining the workforce, but actually people like me, Generation X. And I am one of those that made the choice to leave the corporate world, set up my own business, and consult back into the corporate world, because it was much better that way. Why? Because I did not want to take over the toxic, badly led organization that I was in beforehand. I didn't feel that we were transforming fast enough. And that's where the divergence is coming apart. So actually, looking at economies and businesses, how they're looking at trends like this and how they're fueling their own organizational transformation behind these, is something that not many organizations are doing. And I'm sure as you've looked at through of those things, is that the other element of that is because we're not actually being data fueled. We're not driving our data. We're not analyzing our data. We're not predicting what is coming and therefore informing decisions. and we're not able to get to a level of data analysis where we can actually prescribe what we're going to do into the future either. So some really interesting things coming out here for economies, for businesses, and for founders. But this really, if I go into, well, what is the problem here? This is what something I call the triple new. So the triple new is this. Now, the triple new is, first of all, the digital aspects. Now, the digital aspects around transformational economies or businesses are wrapped around these elements that you see around the spoke. So first of all, we're just round the corner from unleashing technologies, things like microcomb technology, quantum breakthroughs, and the one just round the corner, which is 5G. That's not quite there yet, but 5G in itself is 10 times faster than 4G. So it takes you to the very fast fiber. So this is where you can start to look at self-driven cars. You can start to look at putting things into smart cities, etc., connecting things, the Internet of Things. But it will be the breakthrough after that, 6G or 8G, because they're going to be skipping 7 maybe, which will give us the bigger breakthroughs. That will unleash artificial intelligence, because right now, those of you with Siri on your phone or with Bixby, as I have on my Samsung, they're not that great, really. Alexa's not that great. You know, I can just about get it to play the next track when I'm listening to music, but anything other than that, apart from the weather and music, it starts to get a little bit more complicated. So for me, when you have the unleashing technologies, this is where AI can become a true personal assistant, and actually your assistant for anybody at any level, in any country, in any organization, whereby they can fuel that data, they can get underneath that data and actually help unleash the human potential within us, because we're not bogged down with all the rest. We're not there yet. Perhaps the most interesting thing is the cyber risk element, which is there at the moment, which is by the end of next year, it's predicted that cyber risk will cost the world around $8 trillion, which puts it within the top 10 economies of the world as a thing, which is really interesting. But cyber and control of information and control of data is what is driving the world. And, you know, I don't have to go into current events to explain the power of data. We have been in the great information war since 2014. We've called it interference, but it has been a war. And that war is being played out in front of our very eyes right now. And the real element that comes into that is also associated with blockchain, which for me is the truth over trust. It's that chain that binds the truth together. So I might trust, let's say, a politician or a business leader or whatever on what they say, but it might not necessarily be the truth. What we need to get to is what's on the left-hand side of that chart, the data. Now, what's interesting about cyber risk is that you, either those ministers who are there or in organizations or associations, your country, your association, your business will be hacked. If it hasn't been already, it will be. Now, the phenomenon that's happening now is that you've got groups like Anonymous who have looked at sensitive data hacking, using their hacking skill actually to start spreading different messaging in one country in particular to stop the war, for example. It's the first time ever that exposed and sensitive databases have been used in this way. Usually it's been to release data. This is happening right now. But that's only one part of the triple new for me. So as we move on, we look to the right-hand side, and we've got then the human transformation coming into it. So the first thing is that with everything on the left-hand side, with transformation over the decade that we've just come through, the pandemic coming to an end and how we emerge out of that, we have a huge cultural shift to manage in our organizations. That is driven by the thing on the right-hand side that you see there, which is the rise of two things, the gig economy that I talked before, but also something we don't talk about enough, the blended workforce. So that is actually the shift that I talked about before into the gig economy. And the fact is that data based on the gig HR experts from last year predict that by 2025, 50% of any organization's workforce could be made up of independent workers moving forward. Now, if that's the case, that challenges everything. It challenges business models, it challenges human capital models. And I work with governments on this point indeed, which is very specifically to help governments almost re-engineer their country to attract digital nomads, so independent workers, let's say like myself, who can work from anywhere, to come into those countries, to bring talent in, work from there, have the policies and structures which are efficient and fast, not mired in red tape and bureaucracy, so that they can actually take advantage of this brand new economy. Not many countries are doing it, and that's a huge competitive advantage moving forward. So that's actually a huge task for many. Slovenia is one that is doing it pretty well, and the Caribbean islands are starting to look at this really seriously now to leapfrog the traditional journey of many countries to get right to where we are now in the digital era. Looking at some of these things where it comes in, we're now looking at, leaders are needing to look at the whole person, not just the person in a role, the holistic health, wellness of the individual. The borderless nature of the working means that we have to break down much faster equity, diversity, and inclusion lenses, and we have to drive the trust of our customers ongoing with all the things on the left-hand side that you see, but critically our employees, because the power shift over the last 2 years has been remarkable. The power shift has moved from employer to employee. The employees are calling the shots, and they expect their leaders and organizations to understand all of this. But when we look right in the middle of this, there is, we talk about the new normal, but like I said before, it's the now normal. So this is where we merge the human and the digital together. We're experimenting with things like hybrid working or distributed working. So hybrid is working at a central location, i.e. an office, but also remotely. Distributed is 100%, if you like, bricks and mortar free, geography free, borderless, or within your own country, but you don't need to be locked into an office. This is where the bringing the technology together with the human point is not happening fast enough. An ecosystem that binds that together and fuels and enables the human touch is one of the most important things in the digital era from my point of view, and one that we're guilty of missing sometimes. And what that is driving when you put all of these things together is an economic transformation, which means that many organizations, particularly over the last year, we've seen this, are shifting their business model because they have discovered through digital, they've discovered new services, new products, new solutions that they can take to market. For example, Gucci. Gucci is a great example of a traditional luxury brand that attracts people into a store for that experience. They've managed to replicate it online and change actually perceptions of what luxury retailing looks like. So they've invited high spend customers to events where they've shown them very high spend items. And I've never been invited to one of these, clearly, but they've invited people to these things. But the clever thing they've done is they've invited celebrities, guests from around the world as a surprise for these people, and their conversion rates have grown from 33% to over 70% over the last 2 years. Incredible. So it's the economic transformation, not just at country level, but at business level, which is driving it. This is the triple new. So what I would like to invite you to do is maybe just take a quick picture of the screen if you've not done this at the moment. And I'd just like to give you 5 minutes with the people that you're sitting next to, just to talk about where do you think you or your organization is right now on this triple new. So please just take 5 minutes and have a discussion among yourselves. Yeah, please do talk to somebody next to you. And just think about this triple new. Where are you as an individual? Where is your organization, or potentially the organizations that you work with that you could advise behind? Because this is where the gold is. You get through this, it's competitive advantage. Just take a few moments. Crucially, what I would also say in your discussion is that if you've identified the reasons why, think about the mindset shift as much as the action that needs to happen when you've talked about where you are now. While some of you are talking about this, I've just gone onto the Slido and I see there are a couple of questions. So as you're discussing it, please carry on. But I know that some of you are still looking at me on the screen here. So why don't I interact with you? So there's a question here that came. What implications from Ayman? What implications does VUCA create for the realistic time horizon of state and corporate strategies? Well, it's a really interesting question. And what I would say is what's true for business is true for countries. You're never too big or you're never too proud to fail. We've seen that coming through. What is competitive advantage right now? Competitive advantage is speed of action. And I had a very interesting conversation with a business leader who has been through this transformation. And I was saying to them, well, I think this is the era of speed, but also of experimentation, right? You know, a 70% solution is good enough. And they agreed and challenged me back on that. They said, absolutely it is. You don't have to be perfect anymore. What you need to do is to drive intent, and you have to practice versioning. He said to me, look, we do this every day. You download an app and you get an update the next day because it's not perfect. And I said, well, that's absolutely right. So I said, well, you challenged me on this. I said, well, actually for us, we actually look at 50% or lower as it's okay. So it's okay for our version 1 to be at a 50% level. So speed, versioning, experimentation, all of these things in the VUCA area can be competitive advantage for you. And that means that the horizon, the time horizon is compressed. So the point I was making before about countries who are looking to attract this brand new potential for their workforce. So people that, are not citizens, they are independent workers. They have a very different system of business versus those who might set up in your country before and the stipulations that are in place. But it's a huge talent element that could be attracted into a country that contributes to the economy, but also centers that economy as the knowledge economy and digital economy moving forward, much like Donald Tusk was saying in that quote that you saw earlier. So I think the time horizon is compressed because speed is competitive advantage, but don't worry about being perfect. So great question, I think, Matt. Thank you. So let me move on and just tie up before I come back to any questions there from the room. So I hope some of you have had a chance just to mull this over a little bit and think about where you are. It's a phenomenon that we don't put together as this triple element, but that's why it feels so difficult at the moment. So what do leaders need to do that they're not doing now to help them through this era? Well, what they need to do is this. They need to get comfortable in knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. And that is really at the heart of that question. Who knows? We've just got to be bold and courageous to move through and start doing something. So that's why I actually said before, this starts with a mindset shift. And my advice to leaders based on organizations I've been in, enlightened leaders that I've seen, but also failing leaders that I've seen, are these 5 things on the right-hand side. So while we have to look on the horizon, much to Ayman's question, we also these days as leaders have to have our feet firmly on the ground, because the operational activities that are happening is where the rubber is hitting the road. It's where acceleration is happening, and it's where implementation is failing, as I talked about before. So being executed-minded means that leaders are moving from what we need to focus on to how we need to implement and how we need to embed the change. Now, that often comes through uncovering and innovating behind new business models, new economy models, experimenting with things, little labs or innovation labs doing that, but always with the people at the heart of what you're doing. This is the human era. This is the human-centered leadership era. So whether it's an economy, whether it's a business, whether it's a startup, whether you're a founder who's using contingent workers, being human-centered and outcome-focused is the secret of success in the digital world. And that's where we're seeing far more talk, and particularly now, I think, with current events, of where we're looking for our leaders to be forces for good in the world, be purpose-led, be society minded, understand the macro factors like climate change and the current brand of capitalism that we have, and start challenging the norms to see what that is. So in order to start that journey, the three things that you could do differently are all level upskilling. So this is where we as leaders need to go on a steep learning curve again. And this is where some leaders that I come across in business and as entrepreneurs, they're just not willing to go. They don't acknowledge that this is it, but this is the era where there is a narrowing capability gap between our people and leaders when you consider new skills like working remotely, collaborating remotely, data-driven, data visualization, agile working, scrums. All of these things are being driven from the ground up, not necessarily from the top down. So there is a perception of narrowing gap, and that people can be part of the solution, but also that an understanding that our leaders need to go on a rapid learning journey, like I said before, to learn, unlearn, and relearn. All of these things that kind of pull together the digital human era that we're in at speed for competitive advantage, and also with an acknowledgement that says, you know what, I'm not the smartest person in the room. I need help. That's probably the bravest thing that we as leaders can do, because we've got some incredibly smart, brilliant people in our organization. And if we're saying that the power is with the employee and we have more employees that we can empower, then we have the opportunity to bring them along with the journey. So this is me saying, don't start thinking of talent with a capital T, like we do in our organizations a lot, which is an exclusive group. Start thinking of talent with a small t, an inclusive group whereby we can unleash leaders at all levels. And one company that I work with around this is Spotify, who are constantly changing. And they say, look, this does get messy, but this is where the magic happens. In the eye of the storm, in the chaos, it's where the magic can happen. So thank you very much indeed. What I'd like you to do is, before I just end, is invite you to go back to Slido before we come to questions. And I would like you to just add in one word that describes your own personal leadership challenge for this triple new. So one more thing, and then we'll come to questions. Okay, great, excellent. Things coming in, yep, scaling, learning again, good one, culture change. Yeah, the compromise and tolerance is a really good one, and this is at the heart of leadership. You know, we're using far more words like compassion, compromise, tolerance, empathy, emotional intelligence. It's really the age of emotional intelligence, and we have to become comfortable on this. Command and control is not necessarily the way forward. Love that flexibility is coming out more and more. Learning again coming out more and more as well. Fantastic. Keep them coming, please. So I will make sure that the outputs of this I send to Dr. Sadi, who can send them to you all. But this may give us actually a blueprint for our own personal journey, but also the leaders that work with us or work in our organizations. Adaption, alignment, great. Absolutely. That human side of things coming out. Empowerment is key. Always being disruptive and looking for the next. We just can't afford to get comfortable these days. We have to, like I say, we have to know what to do when we don't know what to do. So we have to be comfortable when to do something when we're uncomfortable doing things. But I love these two that are coming out at the front: flexibility and mindset, and the EQ aspect that we have. IQ is simply not enough in this new era. For success in the next 5 years, we have to have people with us and as part of the solution, not telling them what to do. We need to bring them along, and we need to encourage them to lead at their level as well. But that starts with a mindset shift first. Right, let me move on and say a proper thank you now to you. And please do connect with me on LinkedIn. Dr. Sadi, I'm very happy to draw to a close that session around the triple new, the digital, the human, and that now normal I talked about. I'm very happy to take any questions if you have time.
So here, okay. Does it work? Am I coming clear? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Yes, I can hear. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much for a very informative and insightful session. Now, in terms of all the complexities and uncertainties and looking at the human element as being the center of things, obviously for step chaos, I would say, around us and the need to do proper balancing and to learn and unlearn and all of this stuff. I think that we cannot afford, I'll refer to one of the panelists in the earlier session was talking about it, that's latching the gears between the different components of the organizations or the society at large, that's the public, the private, and the now look of organizations and let's say whether that's public sector or private sector. I think that what was acceptable in the past in terms of quote unquote toxicity or less than optimal organizational climate around clarity, around standards, performance and fairness, etc., and creating a proper synergy and teaming, I think that needs to be surfaced, and I would expect that we need a higher level of maturity in terms of work ethics and maybe, for that matter, really ethics at large. Sorry for a bit of a lengthy question. I hope it fits within the agenda of the session. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and you raised such an important point that I touched on. I think this is the era of distributed leadership. We talk about empowerment, leadership at all levels, taking ownership. But you know what? We've been talking about that for over 100 years, and we haven't got it right in many organizations. I even remember when I first joined, my first company I joined was Procter & Gamble when I was salesperson, and it was drummed into me, oh yes, you can take ownership and you can be empowered to do things, but it didn't work in reality. And we're still talking about this thing. And one of the reasons is because we haven't, as you say, is that we haven't looked at our human capital framework, the climate of our and culture of our organization, and we haven't looked at that as a collective. We've looked at it in certain parts at the granular levels, either by function, by people, by talent, by otherwise. So for me, we need a new human capital manifesto for our times. It's something I call gig HR because it reflects the kind of workforce that we're going to have in the next 5 years. Maybe not now, but I think we have to be future driven in terms of how we gear our organizations now, because speed is competitive advantage. So that human capital manifesto brings together for me the three things of climate, culture, and the collective, a more collective approach to leadership, unleashing leaders at all levels, which means that actually there's a huge mindset shift at executive leader level. That has to change so that the conditions can be created so that a true age of empowerment can thrive. And then a second component of how we actually execute that, because as we know, that's where strategies like this often fail in the implementation, to make sure that the structure's in place so that we move away from, let's say in simple terms, performance management to performance support. So we become coaching led, we become mentors, we fuel these leaders at all levels, or in-role CEOs, as I call them, to actually do things, to do those things that we're saying that the executive leaders should do. Experiment, maybe fail a little bit, but do it in a controlled manner. So I think there's a huge shift needed. And I think what you're saying around that human element really needs to be understood by many economies, but also many businesses and their leadership. Thank you very much for raising the question. Hello? I do.
Saying that
Well, it's like a cliffhanger. It was like, yes, the research was saying.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it
Okay.
was saying that in order to have a successful projects, you need to have stakeholder engagement. And in order to have a stakeholder engaged, you need mainly emotional intelligence. And especially with the rise of artificial intelligence, it's not the decrease of emotional intelligence. On the contrary, you need more of leaders emotionally intelligent than technical experts. And this is confirms that this is true. You need more and more leadership and coaching and mentoring for project management and for any CEO level, any leadership level. That's it.
Yeah, and it's such a good point, because this is where the whole conversation around human-centered leadership is around the collaborative nature of that. And the emotional intelligence point is really key, because we used to talk about IQ and EQ being that wonderful mix. We're now starting to hear IQ, EQ, and AQ. That AI quotient that comes into it as well, and how we need to bridge the gap between the artificial and the human when that starts to becoming more of it as well. So as we start to use, and what's happening now, as we start to use more technologies, we can start to be more impersonal rather than human-centered. We might be connected. I might have Slack and I might have a collective there, but we might not do those human things beyond sending a message or sending a directive that we need to do. So the human element here and the learning that happens is we need to learn how to live with and use and collaborate with technologies that can accentuate the human touch, so that emotional intelligence, that collaborative nature, the human-centered points of empathy particularly that we were talking about, can come front and center, and that can be a strong driver for success.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jeremy. Very interesting indeed. And hopefully next time you'll be with us in person.
I definitely will. Thank you very much for having me and letting me have this session with you all. I hope you found it interesting.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now with our last session with Robin Speculand also had the same problem, and we had to bring him with us on Zoom. Now actually Robin and Jeremy, they formulated the digitalization leadership specialist, and they have a maturity score, and Robin is about to share with us the application that we can utilize to assess the score of maturity of our organizations. Hi, Robin.
Hey, Saeed.
How are you?
I'm good. Well, it looks very dark from me.
Yeah. Actually, we are sharing your picture and sound on a very large screen, and you can see the audience as well. Robin Speculand is co-founder of Strategy Implementation Institute with Antonio Nieto Rodriguez. He's also co-founder for the Digital Clock, or the Digital Leadership Specialist. And he's going to speak to us today about digital transformation. It was supposed to be tomorrow, but we had to shift it due to travel issues and constraints. And by that, I'll leave you with Robin, who's our last session today. So Robin, you can share your screen if you like, and start.
Okay. Work with me for just a moment. Imagine the scenario inside an organization. There's a rumor of something new about to happen. everyone's been called into the town hall meeting. And as they take their seats, the CEO walks onto the stage and says, "Ladies and gentlemen, I've invited you here today for the launch of our new digital strategy. It is a strategy that is going to be good for each and every one of you. It will be good for our customers and good for our stakeholders. But I alone can't make it happen. I need each and every one of you to come together, not just as a team, not just as a department, but as a family. Because only as a family can we make our digital strategy come alive." And he turns to the audience and says, "Are you with me?" And everyone's cheering and shouting. And as the CEO walks off the stage, two guys at the back of the room turn to each other and go, "What was all that about? I don't know, but there's a free lunch outside. Let's go and get something to eat." On any given day, there's a CEO somewhere in the world launching a digital strategy. And here's the first question from my session. What percentage of digital strategies are successful today? After all the fanfare, the preparation, the research, the development, what we're discovering is that only 1 in 3 digital transformations deliver on their goals. And the benchmark for success is achieving just 50% of your goals. Now, let me pause just to reflect and comment what that means. We all know how critical and urgent it is. We've all been under pressure to build an omnipresence, to find alternative channels to support and service our customers. But still, we are struggling. And I know already this has come up as a key theme in the conference, the challenge. We all recognize it, but what is the challenge? How do we overcome it? And that's what's going to be my pleasure in the short time I have with you to share. So this 1 in 3 success, Antonio, afternoon, Antonio, I know you're there in person. Unfortunately, I couldn't join you. Jeremy, who's already spoken, is Antonio and I work, as I mentioned, in the Strategy Implementation Institute, where we've researched this data. Jeremy, who just spoke, is also my partner in the Digital Leadership Specialist. And with Antonio, we focus on virtually providing strategy implementation. And with Jeremy, we focus on supporting organizations through digital transformation. So 1 in 3 we've got from our research, and you can see the others, BCG, McKinsey, IBM, also found the same thing. The research shows us that for 20 years, we've been looking at implementation. And in 2020, at the beginning of the year, we were delighted. Antonio and I were discussing how it's getting better. And yet, there was an outlier when we published the results at the beginning of 2020. And the outlier was digital transformation. And as you just saw, it's reversed the trend. And now we're getting worse. Why? Because digital transformation is even tougher than traditional implementation. So, Sai, thank you for the invitation to present today. Thank you also for being flexible. I'm almost made it to the conference. I'm actually speaking to you from Dubai today, even though my background is from Singapore. And I was hopefully going to be able to join you today, but unfortunately, the quarantine is still 2 weeks if I'd gone back to Singapore, which made it unmanageable. And as I've already mentioned, not only with Antonio partnering with the Institute and Jeremy with the leadership specialist, but I also run another company called Bridges, which I started in 2000. I was previously regional VP for Citigroup Asia Pacific, and I walked away from banking. As much as I loved it, I followed my passion in strategy implementation. And you can see on the top line, I've had the pleasure of speaking at TED, being nominated for Thinkers 50, won the 21-22 Strategy Award from Prestige, and been nominated and awarded Global Gurus, and published the case study with Harvard, as well as featured BBC, INSEAD, Financial Times, and others. And I also published a number of books on the challenges of digital and strategy implementation. The most recent is The World's Best Bank, that came out just a few months ago, telling the story of a bank out of Singapore, DBS, and how they transformed from a legacy company to not just a digital, but the world's best bank. So in my time, the first thing I want to do is challenge and shake up some of your thinking. Why? Because if we're failing 2/3 of the time, we need to think and act differently. So just a little bit of fun to kick off. This is from a race in Italy, where I'll be in a couple of months, and it shows a little bit of innovation. And we often think innovation and we think SpaceX and reaching the moon, but it's the little things. So this is a rider who innovates to go from last to first place in a race. Or I hate 10-pin bowling, so this made me laugh. How to solve 10-pin bowling. Or it could be if you follow American football, you confuse the competition by just doing something a little bit different. So for my next few slides, I've got a quiz for you. So on your own, can you decide the answer to the questions are either fact or myth? And the questions start easy and then get a little bit harder as we go on. I've got about half a dozen questions for you to test your digital knowledge. Here we go. In digital transformation, a digital vision is a necessity to succeed. Fact or myth? What do you reckon? It's a fact. Why? Without it, you have departments, teams working in completely different directions. The digital vision gives you alignment and it brings together a meaningful purpose. I was working with one company in South Africa, and when I started working with them, the teams were competing in customer journey mapping rather than collaborating. And this was because they all had different agendas. Each department had its own goals with no common alignment. So a digital vision is critical to give us a common alignment. Question 2. Business leaders are accountable for technology targets. Fact or myth? What do you reckon? This is a fact, and it's one of the most powerful best practices that I can share with you in my short time. When inside your organization, you give the technology and the business shared goals and measures, it breaks down the silos. It aligns and supports you towards that digital vision. And it also starts to help support the reduction of the technology bottleneck. This is a very powerful best practice. Number 3, from digitalization, revenue savings are greater than revenue generated. Now this one takes a little more thought. Fact or myth? It's a myth. Initially, yes, there are the cost savings. But over the long run, once you move from products and services to platforms, you lock your customers in, and digital customers spend at least twice as much, so they bring in double the income to traditional customers, and they create more than 10 times self-led transactions on your platforms. So your top line grows greater than your bottom line savings. Number 4, the older the organization, the less profit per employee generated. Fact or myth? It's a fact. Older organizations need to invest in upgrading legacy systems and training employees, whereas newer organizations have less people and can leapfrog into the latest and best technology. And last question, number 5, the CEO leads digital transformation organization. Fact or myth? It's a myth. And just a little bit of humor. So here we go. What I'd like to focus on for the remainder of my time with you is why digital transformation is tougher than traditional implementations. I'd like to share with you the framework to guide your organization through it that Jeremy and I have developed. And then at the end, I'd like to introduce an index that Saeed's going to, if he's not already, shared with you that to assess where you are on your digital journey. So why it fails, a model for success, and where you are yourself. So why does digital transformation fail? Because automation does not equal transformation. It's not about putting in RPA, robotic process automation, to your back-end processes, or becoming AI ops. It's about transforming your whole organization. Another way of framing this is it's not about digital lipstick, it's about transforming the organization. And today we're seeing in many of the organizations, they're blowing up the traditional and old way of working. Now, this either scares you or excites you. And many people are worried about it, and the others see it as a wonderful opportunity to get closer to our customers, what we call zero customers, zero distance to our customers, to really redefine how we provide, leverage the emerging technologies. So in 2018-19, under the Digital Leadership Specialist, we researched and interviewed over 1,800 leaders across North America, Europe, and Asia Pacific, including the Gulf and the rest of the Middle East. And we identified the top 3 reasons why digital transformation failed 2/3 of the time. The first one is culture. For many organizations, if you're working in silos with cubicles, you're going to fail. The culture has to be supporting agile, open, and encouraging, bringing people together, helping and supporting them to communicate. But culture, as Antonio and I have discovered in the Institute, is the hardest of all the elements in implementation to change. So to change the culture of a company takes tremendous focus. Why? Because it's about changing everything, and everything means everything. The second, in no order, of the 3 reasons why digital transformation fails is it's not about tweaking or adjusting your business model, as I just shared, which is what we call applying digital lipstick. It's about, for many, whole business transformation. I just came from last week speaking in Barcelona at the World Mobile Congress, and we were talking about the telecoms. And they have massive investment having to go in to upgrade their legacy systems, as we're now not just focusing on 5G, but 6G. And for the telecoms, the race is on. If you think about it, none of the telecoms have yet really become the best of all the others. They're all racing to make a difference. But it's not about just tweaking it, it's about whole transformation of their business model. And the third reason is the senior leader's mindset. What we're seeing is so much frustration among employees and middle managers. They're excited about the opportunity. They can't wait to jump in. And I was just running in Dubai the other day, a public seminar, and the frustration for many of the participants was that we get it, Robin, but our bosses don't. And we still have to get signatures of approval, go to committees, wait for budgets. Working agile means working fast, where people are in incubators and accelerators. Leaders have to recognize they have to let go of legacy leadership, the old style of committees and knowing everything and signing off. And a good behavior example of this is leaders go from being the first person to speak in a meeting to the last. Now, what does that mean? Typically, they start the meeting, they lead it, they guide the company. But in digital transformation, they have to spend more time listening because there's a plethora of activities that start from the ground up, such as design thinking and hackathons. So the leaders need to step back and listen what's going on in the meetings and work more as a guide and a coach through the transformation. And let me bring you right up to date with our latest research from 2022. What's the biggest challenge today for companies, not just in Asia, but around the world? It is after you've done the initial launch, the challenge that most or many companies are facing today is embedding digital into their DNA, into the way they work. The initial launch, with all respect, is relatively easy. Once you get the support of your board, you get the budget through, you select the technology that's going to improve your business for your customers. You get people excited, you send them on training, but now you have to start changing the way you work every day. And this is where many companies are struggling today. So, key message is that yesterday's performance no longer guarantees tomorrow's results in today's world. And my next slide, if nothing else from my time with you, is the one that I hope you'll remember the most. It's not about having a digital strategy. Now, what's wrong with a digital strategy? When you have a digital strategy, you narrow your thinking. You're looking just at what's happening within your organization and what needs to be done. So what's wrong with that? We've been studying the successful companies both under the Strategy Implementation Institute and also under the Digital Leadership Specialist, and we discovered that the successful companies have a strategy to compete in a digital world. The difference is not just semantics. The difference is that when you have a strategy to compete in a digital world, you broaden your perspective. You have a wider view. And today, the winds of change blow harder and faster externally than they do internally, which means the business landscape is changing under your feet quicker around you than inside your company. So you need, I'll just go back, you need to have that broad view of a strategy to compete in a digital world. So whether it's diversity, whether it's sustainability, geopolitical, what's happening in Europe, you need to be seeing what's happening in the bigger picture. And we've seen also, just as a summary slide, there are 4 R's that capture what needs to be done. And when you look in the West at companies like Spotify, that Jeremy does a lot of work with, Amazon, Netflix, or in the East, like Alibaba, Ping An, and Tencent, you'll see there are constants whether you're in the East or the West. What are these constants? The 4 R's. The first one is redefine your business model. So a simple example is just think how Netflix has gone from sending out DVDs to streaming that redefined their whole business model, and as we all know, put blockbusters out of business. Rewrite the rules of competition. So you look how Spotify in the West works, how they now do the sharing of music, completely changed the way that we listen and how we music lists that we have now. So Spotify has redefined the competition. In the East, Ping An, it used to take 3 months if you had a car accident to get the insurance. Today in Ping An, it only takes 3 minutes because they use AI machine learning. You upload a picture and within 180 seconds, it's approved and the funds are being wired to your account for the repairs. Rewire, the third R, rewire the way employees work. Again, Netflix is a wonderful example of this. In their rules, they're very brief, they're short. They really support their employees, recognizing that there are better ways in the way we work today, which Jeremy has talked about. And the last R is reshaping how value is created and captured. You look, for example, at Tencent, how they use influencers on mobiles to grow the business, or Alibaba's model, where they grow using servers compared to Amazon, who grow using warehouse distribution. So we've reshaped how value is created. And the underlying message is today strategy is getting faster and we're changing it more quickly than ever before. And there are some companies who say, we haven't got time for strategy. We just experiment. We throw it at the wall, see what works. So I have 2 things left that I'm going to share with you in about the next 5-10 minutes. With so many organizations, as we just seen, struggling into digital transformation, I'd like to share with you the model. It's called the ticking clock model that came from the white paper Jeremy and I published in 2019 that was recognized by places such as Forbes, Dialogue, CEO Today, and won a number of awards. We've also published the ebook. And here we go. Let me share the model. And I'm just going to give you an overview today because I appreciate you have a lot of presentations. There are 3 strategic stages for digital transformation. The first one is the future thinking, which links to my myth and fact question about digital vision. You have to have a clear direction where you're taking the company, how we're leveraging technology, what it means to our customers, what we want employees doing different. The second strategic thought area is around the business model and creating centricity around the operations, customer, and culture. So what's going to change, looking at the value that we create? And the third strategic area, as we just saw, because strategy is getting shorter and shorter, we need to be always future ready because tomorrow is coming quicker than ever before. We're changing, in other words, we're changing faster than any other time in history. So that's the 3 strategic stages, but how do you implement it? There are 11 steps. Now, the first thing you'll notice is the circular, because digital transformation is not linear. You need to be working at various things simultaneously, not systematically. Then the more observant, you'll notice it stops at 11. Huh? Why 11? Because if you're waiting for 12, it's like the atomic clock. It's too late. And even though they're numbered, it's not necessarily an order. It's just because we called it a ticking clock. So I'll just run briefly through them. For future thinking, we've already talked about digital vision, and I'll reinforce the importance of leaders changing their mindset, letting go of what we, of the giving permission, signing off, going to committee, instead working agile, using incubators and accelerators, empowering and guiding their employees. Then we move to centricity, and you can see 3 to 9. Very much, most companies start by building their architecture around their technology. The question is, which of the technologies will deliver the biggest impact for our customers? Should we be focusing on IoT, blockchain, AI, machine learning? And also, we're looking at ecosystems because we work today in a hyper-connected world. Number 4, for large organizations, is about can take up to 2 to 3 years, which is restructuring to a data-first culture. I was working just a few weeks ago with one of the global pharmaceuticals, and they didn't realize how long it's going to take them to really become a data-first culture. Key message here, the better the data, the better the decisions. Number 5, you have to protect your customers' trust from the beginning. Managing risk. What will happen when you are hacked? Hackers can sit in your system for up to 474 days before you even know they're there. So you've got to build in protection from day one. At 6, becoming customer obsessed. It's not about thinking what works best for us, but working outside in. Start with what's best for your customers, then design and develop your platforms. At 7, many people today are familiar with, adopt agile, using Scrum Masters, using the new approach of agile, work faster. Today, key message, speed is more important than size. Number 8, learn to experiment and co-create. To innovate, you have to experiment. And to experiment, you have to fail. So you got to create a culture of psychological safety and encourage employees to try new things. Key takeaway, many companies today have awards saying you dared to fail. You tried it, you learn from it, you move on. And the last part of centricity is empowering employees. You have to empower them because the digital transformation happens at the point between the customer and employees. And the last 2 areas are future ready. We need new measures for digital that we've never considered before. For example, what's the difference between traditional customer revenue and digital customers? An easier one, how paperless are we? Or how fast, how much scalability do we have within the organization? And number 11 is something that's really impacting, but it's very, very new, is now prescribing the future using predictive analytics. So in strategy, it's reshaping the way we think strategy by using data as prescriptive and predictive analytics. So I share the model with you, and Saeed can, if anyone would like to follow up on it, it has, it's all about it. Remember, if you wait too long, it will be like the atomic clock. Okay. So for the last part of my presentation, let me just share with you that Saeed and I wanted, and Jeremy, we wanted to give you an opportunity to identify where you are on your own personal digital journey, not for your company, but for you. So Saeed will share with you later on, if he's not already, the QR code for what is called the Digital Maturity Index. And it's our pleasure to give this to you complimentary, where it's about a 4 to 5 minute online assessment. And immediately upon completing it, you will receive a report telling you where you are on your own personal digital transformation. So don't answer it from your company point of view, but from your own perspective. And you will then see from the report, there are 3 levels. You are in the reacting stage, which means you're just getting an understanding of the language, beginning to transform yourself, reading a lot about the new terms and coming to grasp with them. Or you're at the embedding stage, where you saw many leaders are struggling today, where you're operating in a manner best described as responsive and anticipatory. And you already possess many of the essential qualities and capabilities. Or you're strategizing. This is the most advanced level, where you're seeing opportunities, you're able to speak the language, you're overcoming challenges. And in the assessment, you'll immediately be not only told which stage you are at, it will also give you recommendations for videos, articles, books you can read, so you can continuously improve your own digital maturity. And I just added this in because I did it 48 hours ago for a client in China. And I was even a little surprised because majority are still in the reacting. This is a company that supplies medical goods to hospitals. And you can see the staff, the employees, majority are still coming to grasp with what digital transformation is about. And one last message on this is I also conducted this in Dubai just a few days ago. And the typical feedback we get is simply by going through the assessment, you see how much you know or don't know by the language and the questions themselves. So I'm going to close out on a lighter note. Which is just some fun examples of digitalization in practice. There's a company in South Korea called the Banana Valley who overcame the banana challenge. Now, what's the banana challenge? Well, you go to the supermarket in Cairo or wherever you live, and you have a choice. You can either buy green bananas and eat them in a few days, or yellow bananas and you have to eat them within a few days. So they created a range from green to yellow. Successful? Oh, yes. They beat the competition despite the fact they charged 3 times more for the bananas. Or this is one of my clients, Sephora, who I thought this was lovely. How often you go into a shop and you feel that you're not being trusted because the assistant follows you around. So if you pick up a red basket, it tells them you'd like assistance. You pick up a black, it means none. Or this one, this is heartwarming. This is a hospital with a children's cancer unit where every time they clean the windows, the window cleaners dress up as the superheroes. And of course, the children are in the cancer unit, look out the window and see Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, and they love it. Or this is in Singapore. During the peak of COVID, we had robotic dogs that if you got too close to each other, would set off an alarm. A couple more, last 2. So this is in Japan. This was the first company, it was a marketing company in the world to give a robot the vote on the board. So they used AI to use the thinking, and the robot had a vote. And this is one of the more popular ones. This is you do your washing, and many of us hate doing the ironing. So you put the clean washing in at the bottom and it comes out folded. So you heard of chatbots, now you know about laundry bots. So I'd like to thank Saeed on the opportunity to address you. And I know with so many keynotes today, half an hour after I finish, you've forgotten half of what I said. So, please, Antonio is with you in person. And Antonio, thank you for making it. He will be able to answer your questions along with Saeed. I wish you all the best on your digital transformation journey. It is exciting. I've worked now for a decade with a bank in Singapore called DBS, who for the last 4 years have been the world's best bank, which is the book I mentioned at the start, and I published that with the CEO. And in the Strategy Implementation Institute, Antonio and I have had the pleasure of updating it recently, so it concludes everything about sustainability and also digital. So Shukran, thank you from Dubai. It's been a pleasure and honor to address you. Saeed, let me hand over to you.
Any questions? Yeah, please, if you didn't, make sure you have left an email or a business card at the registration desk so we can send you the maturity index, and this will be sent to all participants. And because we are agile and we have to adapt, since we took too much time this morning in the very fruitful discussions, we will postpone Antonio Q&A for tomorrow with Dr. Saadi on Vision Realization Office. So we cannot delay it more because people I know have other engagements. So tomorrow we'll have the special Q&A of Professor Antonio. And now there's the book signing outdoors. Make sure you have a signed copy of Dr. Antonio. And those who are registered for the master class, please wait at the registration desk with Dr. Kirbias.
Robin, thank you very much.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you.
Thank you and bye-bye.
Thank you.
Welcome. Okay. Then I have it. And offer. Okay. A lot of work, huh? Yeah. Chair is so important also. Yeah. I have to. Okay, give me the name. Architect. Yeah. I've done it now.
That's important.
Exactly. Thank you. Hello. Nice to meet you. Ah,
It's kind of mixed now between
yeah.
Those sides have to be more fertile.
More sides.
Yeah, about how it's used to be.
I think our quality is so important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Ah, finally. Nashma, nice to meet you, Nashma. I think they take pictures here, yeah? Oh, with you can look weird. I forgot. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, just for the name, I don't want to. Eman. Thank you. Oh, nice to see you. Let me just see for the spelling. Yeah. I'm very impressed with what you're doing here.
Richard, beautiful. You are ready, so I'm getting part of this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.